1. I'm a 19-year-old female and have been staying at my 25-year-old boyfriend's apartment for the past several months. I want to preface that I do have my own apartment that I pay for. I have just been staying with him so I can spend more time with him. Also, what I will be discussing in this post has been happening long before I started dating my boyfriend. My boyfriend Ryan lives with his mom, who has mobility issues and is older, and brother, a 30-year-old male, Tyler. All three have been through some tough situations in their lives, and so they all still live together. They do split bills, but it is odd. Their mom pays for most of the rent payment and groceries if needed. Ryan pays for groceries, internet and cable, Netflix, Disney+, etc. And Tyler pays for their phone bill. I'm not sure why, but that's how it is. Recently, Ryan has been helping with rent too. Tyler makes enough to help out with bills and then some, but he says he has to pay for other stuff. Both Ryan and Tyler received a decent sum of money as an inheritance from a grandparent as well. He will leave messes in the kitchen, i.e. if he heats up stuff in the microwave, he will leave the trash on the counter or just uneaten food. Open medicine bottles on the counter, which are knocked over one way or another onto the floor when their dog or cat could get into, and when confronted, he will come up with some bullshit excuse about how he is too tired or he is too depressed or whatever. I'm not saying that we're dismissing the fact that he has depression. Both myself and Ryan have it too, but he does absolutely nothing to help himself out of it, and just uses it to manipulate his mother mostly. Tyler doesn't have any method of transportation for himself. He doesn't own a car or scooter, college town, because he has wrecked so many cars that his insurance is unbelievably high, and he doesn't want to pay it. So instead, he will guilt-trip his mother into using her car to go to work. He has a bicycle that Ryan bought for him, and a bike lock, and his work would be at most a 10-minute bike ride. But it's only like 5 in the car, and he is simply lazy. He also works overnight shifts as well, which I will explain in a second. So, because his work schedule is different, my boyfriend has to work specific hours in order to pick up his mom from her work, because his brother has her car, and whenever he wants to go see a girl, he will just take the car without asking. And a lot of the time his mom needed it. Tyler and Ryan also have separate drawers in the fridge for their personal food items, which Ryan and his mother buy since they pay for groceries. And if Tyler doesn't like the things that he got, or runs out, he'll eat Ryan's. Ryan has told him multiple times to stop, and if he wants something different, to buy it himself. But Tyler says that because he lives there and buying groceries isn't his job, he can take whatever he wants. All of this stuff happens all the time, but more recently, he was having a girl over. His ex broke up with him a few months ago. She was basically a prostitute. She didn't have a job and another man was paying her rent. In return, she would have sex with the other guy. Tyler knew this, but thought she actually loved him. This was not the case. He paid her rent multiple times, had bought a Switch and was letting her use it, etc. Then, right after he paid her rent, she dumped him. He let her keep the Switch. A few days ago, Tyler had a different girl over, and asked Ryan to use a console to watch a show. Ryan has a PS4 and 5 and a Switch, but Ryan said no because Tyler doesn't take care of his stuff, when he has let him before, and Tyler had given the one he had to his ex. We had left right afterwards to go hang out, and Tyler texted Ryan and said that they were going out to the movies instead. We get back late at night and I was chilling in Ryan's bed watching some YouTube. I noticed that my pillow that I had bought from my house that I used to cuddle or put between my legs was missing. I mentioned this to Ryan and he was puzzled, as we didn't take it with us, or remove it from the room. I asked him to check Tyler's room, as I had a hunch at this point, and he goes to his room and finds it in Tyler's bed with him passed out. At this point, I'm livid, and have had multiple things happen that were less ideal, and I start sobbing. Ryan sends an angry text to Tyler and tries his best to comfort me, but I am extremely exhausted and I needed the pillow to sleep. But I needed it to be washed first, since a random person had used it. Both Ryan and his mom want to kick him out, but his name is on the lease, so they can't. They also can't move out because they don't have enough money. They were even discussing moving before Ryan and I started dating, and Tyler said something along the lines of, "Well, if we all pitched in, we would have enough." Ryan immediately said that he doesn't do that now, and that's the reason why they don't have enough to move. Their mom has been through a lot that is personal and not for me to get into, but she is such a nice lady and doesn't deserve it. It makes me so angry. 2. As I start to type this out, I don't even know where to begin. The degree of entitlement in my aunt and cousin are so extreme, it's going to be difficult to keep it concise. A couple of months ago, my aunt visits me from out of town. I have a really small apartment, so at night, I would let her sleep in my bed and I'd go stay at my boyfriend's. One night she came home in an Uber from a party. She told me when I dropped her off that she was trying to get drunk. The next day, early before I get up to drive home, she texts me and says she fell in a hole when the Uber driver dropped her off, and then says that the Uber driver ran over her foot. Already, I'm skeptical. Why skeptical, you ask? My aunt has a repeated history of lawsuits against previous employers, apartment buildings, landlords, and more. This isn't her first rodeo. My aunt is an obese woman, and she says that the injuries that were caused, like a slipped disc, etc., were not pre-existent and that her quality of life has changed. Some more context. Me and others have always suspected that she has Munchausen. She has always used her health problems to get attention or money, and all she talks about are her consistent health problems. It's always something, but none of the solutions for these presumed health problems are ever pursued to be resolved. I get back and she's walking around, maybe limping a bit, but she kept saying it was her foot hurting, and she kept icing her foot while her leg was stretched straight out. The tests she's had done later say that she has a partially torn ACL. My best friend recently had that injury, and there's no way she could have laid her leg out flat like that. A couple of days after she leaves, she texts me to tell me she's suing Uber. I don't acknowledge the text, and a couple of days later, she tells me she's suing my landlord. Immediately, I'm livid. If this were any other person, I knew motivations would be different. But I know my aunt, and her pattern of behavior in her life speaks volumes. She doesn't care about the fact she is compromising my living situation for her own benefit. So, how does the entitlement come in? Not only does she think she's entitled to my safety in my own home, but not a week before she writes a laundry list of things she wants my father, her brother, to pay for her daughter's wedding. As a single mother, my family took her daughter under our wing. She would come stay with us for summers, and at Christmas my mom would get her more gifts than we'd get. When we'd be bratty kids and complain, she'd tell us that she didn't have a dad to give her gifts, and she didn't want her to feel left out. Why isn't her mother buying her gifts, you ask? Because of her horrendous management of the good money she does make. She says she's always broke, but she always had a good salary job, but all her money goes God knows where. Paying her astronomical credit card payments. I know it's not going to medical bills because she frequently brags about how she doesn't pay her medical bills. Who brags about that? Her phone rings all day, collectors calling her. So let's get back to now, asking my dad for thousands of dollars for the wedding, all while she's suing his daughter's landlord behind his back. What does she need money for, you ask? Well, her daughter is getting married in October, and like she wrote in that email, she needs money for the wedding. So when I told my parents, my dad got pissed and called, emailed, and texted her that she needed to drop this. She never responded. Timing was so bad because the following week her daughter was supposed to come stay with me for a couple of days. I almost told her not to come because it was already too late, I felt, and I decided I'd try to be the bigger person. After all, she isn't her mom. But I should have remembered that after 2 years of living with them, she is in fact her mother. Oddly enough, I had a medical emergency with my dog the night before she was supposed to stay here, and I couldn't have 2 additional people in my 600-square-foot apartment and be able to take care of my ailing dog properly. So she was able to go stay with a friend. I saw her the first day she was here. I didn't bring up anything, and she didn't either, but it was clear there was a huge elephant in the room. That day, my aunt decides to answer my dad by starting a group chat with the 3 of us and sending a pic of her lawyer's card and says we can ask him questions. My dad angrily replies something like, "Don't text me." I didn't hear from my cousin at all that second day, and finally she texts me this long text about how she doesn't feel comfortable seeing me because of what just happened, and she says she is saddened by the lack of empathy shown to her mother when her mother needs this money to pay her medical bills. And now this is going to ruin her wedding. At this point, I let it rip. I pointed out how those funds from the suit won't go to those medical bills because she doesn't pay them, and that's a well-known fact by those who know her. So I asked her what will the funds go for, her wedding? I also brought up her entitlement as well, and in the same sentence where she refutes her entitlement, she starts saying where was the money I asked for from the will. Our grandmother's will, who isn't even in the grave yet. I could go on about my cousin and aunt's entitlement for a little cut of everything me and my family has, but I'll end with a little story to give you a glimpse into the entitlement. When I moved to Utah, where they both lived, I had to go home to get my stuff and come back. I had originally been visiting and didn't plan on moving, but when I saw it, I wanted to stay. So I went home to get my things. A mutual friend of ours hung out with the both of them at Dave and Buster's. This story was told to me by this mutual friend when I was trying to excuse their mistreatment and financial abuse they put me through. At the time, I knew they were opportunistic, but I never thought they'd do that to their own family. So I would try and make excuses for them. Finally, the friend stops and tells me, "I wasn't going to tell you this, but I think you need to hear this." While out at Dave & Buster's, they, mostly my aunt, were complaining about how she had no money. My friend, who has no qualms about calling people out, asks her, "Then why are you spending money right now?" Her response, "It's okay, Gabby has money." Since me and my cousin had that nasty text convo I wrote about, that is the last we have spoken. Full no contact, and I have no desire to ever speak to them again. 3. Years ago, my dad met Harold through mutual friends, and they hit it off. I was 18 and in college when I met him, and we never had a close relationship. However, he always seemed to think of himself as a family friend, and was extremely infantilizing and condescending towards me. Every time I saw him, I tried to tell myself it wasn't that bad, only for him to prove me wrong less than a minute later. Harold would disrespect my boundaries, say things like, "You're not 19, you're a baby," when I was talking to other people, and patronize me, my education, or my hobbies whenever he had the chance. He always noticed that annoyed me, to which he'd playfully ask if I hated him. I always said no, but only for my father's sake. The final straw came the day Harold interrupted to barbecue to say, "I really like you, even though you're an impolite brat." I was 20 years old. I'd been quiet all day, working on a paper during the barbecue, but replied patiently and politely whenever anyone addressed me. And even if that hadn't been the case, I knew he didn't have the right to talk to me like that. After that, I started making an effort to avoid any events I knew he'd be attending. Yesterday was my father's girlfriend's birthday. They threw a small lunch party at my dad's apartment. I went there with my fiancée and our 6-month-old son. Harold was there. I hadn't seen him in months, but he still talked to me as if I was a dumb child. Never mind that I'm engaged, a mother, and 26 years old. I spent the whole party ignoring his helpful advice about me being too young to get married or be a mom. It helped that most of the other guests seemed to disagree with him. My baby spent most of the afternoon sleeping. There's a bassinet in my old room. He woke up hungry, so I went to breastfeed him and excused myself from the party for a while. I got back to jokes and comments, all from Harold, about how I was probably struggling if my son was managing to leech me away for so long. He went on to interrupt a conversation I was having with another of my dad's friends to question pretty much everything about my parenting. He doesn't even have custody of his daughter, by the way, and to make more comments about my age. I decided I couldn't take it anymore after he asked if I thought about giving my baby up for adoption. I got my son until my fiancée were leaving. We said goodbye to everyone except Harold. When we got to the door, Harold came to ask why we were leaving. I tried to make up an excuse, but he kept trying to make us stay. After a small back and forth, he jokingly asked if I hated him. And this time I said, "Yes, I do. Can we go now?" He didn't say anything, and we left. On my way home, my fiancé said he was proud of me. My father called this morning to say the opposite, and we had a small fight, but ultimately decided to drop the subject. I'm sure this isn't over, but if it keeps going, it won't be because of me. And before I go, just to answer some common questions, I don't think Harold is in love with me. He didn't tell me to give up my son. He asked if I thought of doing so when I got pregnant. It was still an awful question, especially since he interrupted a conversation I was having with someone else. My dad's girlfriend's pregnant friend, who was asking about my own pregnancy and delivery. To ask it. I don't like making a big deal out of things unless necessary. If I'm uncomfortable, I leave. If I don't like someone, I avoid them. It's usually less stressful. The fight between me and my father ended when I told him about the adoption comment. I don't think he gets that's not the only reason I left, but it was definitely what broke the camel's back. I don't really need my father to stop being friends with Harold. He's a grown man capable of making his own crappy decisions. I never told my dad I hated Harold, because I never thought I had to like him in the first place. He's my father's friend, not mine. And I've been distancing myself from Harold since I was 20, meaning I haven't seen him much in the last 6 years. My fiancé was on the other side of the room and wasn't listening to Harold's comments. I filled him in when we got to the car. He's 100% on my side. 4. We're a family living in an apartment with those typical doorbells that make a deafening noise, so loud that you can hear the bells from other apartments ringing. Normally, when we hear that sound, we expect it to be the mailman or someone from our home. However, last year, 2022, we began hearing children ringing our doorbell and running away. It was an isolated incident, and I thought they wouldn't do it again, right? But to our surprise, the next day, there they were again, repeatedly ringing the doorbell. This became a routine. The doorbell rang once, twice, 3 times in a row, until one day my brother-in-law, who we'll affectionately call Cricket, he has this thing for eating crickets, hence the nickname, decided to confront them. He went out to the balcony and scolded them. They didn't come back for a long period of time, almost a year. But yesterday the kids rang the doorbell again. Imagine the scene. 7 kids ringing the doorbell and running like crazy. I, already completely irritated, couldn't take it and ran out to the balcony and shouted, "Sons of a bitch!" But guess what? At 2 a.m., the kids were back. "Ring it! Come on, do it!" They encouraged each other. But this time, Cricket came out to the balcony and shouted, "Go ahead, ring that doorbell." And the kids rang away in fear. Today, when we returned home, we saw the kids getting ready to ring the doorbell again. And guess what our reaction was? "Come on, ring the doorbell, come." We shouted in a playful tone. At that moment, my dad noticed an adult man, apparently responsible for them, and went to explain the situation. But you know what he said? "Why are you shouting at the kids? You should be shouting in prison." I know. My dad simply said, "For you to keep saying that, I'm leaving." And he left. A lady who lives in the apartment below came to talk to us about why we were arguing. After a brief explanation, she said the kids had rung the doorbell of her 80-year-old friend and even broken something of hers. Her friend got angry and talked to the kid's mother. The kids said, "Liar! We never touched anything!" And the mother simply believed her children. I wonder, why would an 80-year-old lie about this? The neighbor from the apartment below decided to intervene and said she would talk to a friend of the kid's mother to try to resolve the situation. In the meantime, I'm thinking of filming the kids ringing the doorbell to show it to their mother. If she reacts negatively, I won't hesitate to call the police and present all the evidence that we have. 5. Years ago, when the late Farrah Fawcett was quite ill with the anal cancer that eventually ended her life, I was having a late lunch in a dinner-style restaurant. I happened to be in this restaurant during a birthday party for a girl who looked middle school age, so approximately 12 to 14. The party guests, all girls, looked to be approximately the same age as the birthday girl. Several of the parents of these youngsters were seated at an adjoining table. At some point, the girls began passing around a magazine with a cover story about Fawcett's health troubles. These girls found the suffering of Fawcett and her loved ones to be hysterically funny. I suppose because of the nature of the illness. I got the impression that the parents were aware of the topic of their daughter's discussion, but the conversation kept on rolling. So I figured the parents were not concerned. I got increasingly agitated that a group of young women found it funny that a woman who was a mum was dying of cancer. So I eventually stormed over to their table to launch into a tirade to the effect of, "Cancer is not fun. It is tragic and painful. I had to watch one of my grandpas die of lung cancer. So I can state with certainty that when someone is dying of cancer, it's a heavy burden for the patient and their loved ones. The person you're making fun of has a son, as well as stepkids. Would you like for you and your families to be the recipients of jokes if one of your family members was dying of cancer? Plus, cancer might not be the greatest topic for mealtime chat." Their parents either did not hear my speech or were pretending not to have heard, while the girls nodded and agreed to change the topic of discussion. I have no idea if the girls understood how or why they were in the wrong in an ethical sense, but at least I was able to finish my meal without hearing insults directed at a cancer patient. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 128. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke the like button. And if you'd like to get the videos a little bit early, you can support me through Patreon for as little or as much as you like. You'll find the link to that in the description, along with a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store, which is on Teespring. You can also make donations during streams and videos like this one on a one-off basis if you wish to do so. While I do not require this, it is very much appreciated. Alright, let's see. No shoutouts today, I don't think. So let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And that is something of a topical one, I guess. What is the biggest, most ridiculous increase you have recently noticed when shopping for groceries? For example, just a year ago, a can of store-brand soup, Morrison's, I'll name them, there's no reason not to name them, was 45 pence for a store, because it's store-brand, it's going to be cheap, right? Just over a year later, it is literally doubled in price. And I noticed that earlier while I was having some trouble with my legs right now, skin-wise. So I'm trying to avoid, putting my shoes on as much as possible because it doesn't do nice things while it's trying to heal. So I thought, okay, I'll just order some groceries and get them delivered. I've not really done that for a while anyway. The only thing I order every month is a delivery of Evian it was this month because it was a good deal. And I thought, I'll throw in some soup to the order. I'm low on cans of soup. I've only got a couple left. And my goodness, doubling in a year. I mean, I think the price for the store brand soap is now the price of the name brand soap used to be. In fact, I think even the name brand soaps used to be a little less than that about a year or two back. I mean, it's not like these stores aren't making a fortune. I'm not going to go off on a tangent because I could quite literally argue for all day and all day tomorrow about it. So, why don't you let me know in a comment below the most ridiculous example of inflation in grocery stores, inflation in quotes, that you've seen. Because it's just an excuse to drive the prices up. It's not that they wouldn't still be making a profit because we all know they already were. Leave your answer in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening. And take very good care of yourselves.